Hello, David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. I am particularly excited today for our guest that you see before us. James King, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
I am so excited to have you on. I mean, you're literally a podcaster within a podcast, I know, but of course, we've got to talk about Bond today. And I've got to step back for a moment because some of my audience may recognize you from ITV and Sky News and BBC Radio. But it's strange to me when you do research on you, it comes up film critic, but critic really doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't describe you well enough because are you a critic or do you love movies?
Well, that's a good first question. I've certainly earned a living as a critic over the last 20 odd years. But it's always been a word I'm not hugely comfortable with, just because I got into the business to champion films, to celebrate films. And of course, critics can do that. Critics doesn't automatically mean that you criticize. Right. However, we do know that there is that element. And I've done that, it's part of the job. But more recently, I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, the work that I do, I'm lucky enough to be in a position where the films I talk about are films that I love. It's almost like if I'm not talking about it, that tells you that I don't particularly like it. But I don't want to spend my time on the radio or on the TV wallowing in negativity, slating something. There are plenty of people who do that and who can do it brilliantly, but that's not something I personally feel that comfortable with. I want to go on and talk about the great films, maybe big movies like a Bond movie, or maybe small films that really need championing, that need someone to spread the love. So yes, I can't deny that I am a film critic, but at the same time, hopefully, certainly with like the Bond podcast, which is me as a presenter, it's not just me in my old mode of sort of breaking down and reviewing a film. I can't review the film. I haven't seen the film yet. It's more about celebrating the legacy of James Bond.
By the way, that word celebration is huge because as a consumer of your material, the word in the Bond community, the diehards, if you will, they love your approach because number one, it's very authentic. You're clearly a fan, so you're straddling the profession and the fandom. But the other thing is that you celebrate. You're very positive, and it made me think as I was walking this morning very early, listening to the newest one that debuted last night. How does somebody get a gig like this? I mean, clearly it was your celebratory attitude. But how does it really happen? Can you tell us a story behind the story?
Yeah, well, I was contacted by Eon, and I know the people at Eon quite well because I've had a relationship with them before and worked on Bond movies before. I did some work at the premiere of Skyfall, for example, which was also down at the Royal Albert Hall where the new film's going to premiere. So I'd worked with them before, and they knew my work from radio. And I'd worked with the production team before, the people who actually produced the show and put the podcast together. I'd worked with them before. So these are people I know and people I have worked with before and have a good relationship with. But it certainly felt like the right time to debut a Bond podcast. It is the first official Bond podcast ever. Of course, there are lots of fan podcasts, yours being one, your work being an example of that. But this was the official one. And it felt like, look, we've got nearly 60 years here to discuss and a bit of a gap since the last one. I mean, this was before it was delayed. There was even then still a bit of a gap. So it felt like the right moment to delve deep, to spend 6 episodes delving into not just No Time to Die, although primarily that, but also how that movie echoes the previous films. And I suppose the celebration element of it, this is something that Barbara Broccoli talks a lot about, is celebrating Daniel, celebrating his final film. And this is why, and I can understand this is why she doesn't want to be drawn on who's going to be next. The new one hasn't even come out yet. Daniel's final film hasn't even come out yet. And we want to celebrate that, for the next few months as this remarkable achievement before people start getting drawn on who's going to be the next one. Although, of course, obviously, there's lots of speculation.
And there's going to be. I mean, that's just natural. But it's interesting something you said around 60 years, because it would have been easy for a company like Eon, who's been around for 60 plus years, to say, what we're going to do the traditional channels, journals, and we'll do our 30-second commercials. But they understood that people are consuming infotainment, as I like to say it, in a different way, and approached you for this. But speculation, as a fan, we know enough about Eon that they're appropriately careful. That's the way I'll phrase it, with this brand, because it is one of the number one brands in the world. So did you, as you're doing the podcast and asking the questions of these celebrities, is there a remote control shotgun underneath the desk? If you say something wrong, is a trigger pulled or not pulled? I mean, are there massive amounts of restrictions as a podcaster?
No, that's not to say that Eon weren't across it, and of course they were. It's their podcast, so they have every right to be across what's going on in the podcast. But I think there's an understanding that there's a huge amount to discuss without feeling the need to get controversial in any way. It's not like we're stuck for things to talk about. There's a huge amount to talk about, and you don't even have to try and dig up any sort of dirt or anything like that. So you're not short of material. And I think in the first episode, Barbara relates a story that her father, Cubby, said to her about the franchise, basically when he was passing it on to her, saying, don't screw it up, although she admits that he used slightly more colourful language than that. And there is that feeling. That's one of the things I've really learned from working so closely on this podcast with the team, is that there is such a love for it and a desire to not screw it up. And you could say, well, anybody in any franchise is going to have that, but because it's a family affair, and that's not just Barbara and Michael and Cubby, but also a lot of the people who work on the film behind the scenes have worked on it for many years and have had relatives working on it as well before them. So there is this family feeling, and they don't want to screw anything up. They want to be careful because they understand the legacy. It's a legacy unlike any other franchise, really. You don't have that family feel with Marvel movies, for example, or even particularly with Star Wars films. That's not to do them down, but there's certainly almost like a human side to Eon and the James Bond franchise that you don't get with those other ones.
I'm so happy to hear the whole humanization theme that you just rolled through, because as a fan, you sit back naturally and go, I wonder how much of this is promotional veneer. I could tell something, though, in your interview style, and I'm about to pay you a compliment, because there's two types of interviewers I find. There's the ones that, they go through their questions one by one, and, here's the next question. You gave the answer. I'm on to the next one. You don't do that. You listen to the answers and then feed your questions or your comments off of those. So I couldn't imagine that it was overly controlled. I could get that vibe from you.
And of course, one of the good things, and I don't think I've said this about any other film, but one of the good things about not having seen the film, which is unusual for me. When I do interviews, normally I've seen the film. But one of the good things about not having seen the film is a genuine inquisitiveness, in that I am in the dark, as are everyone listening, as is everyone listening. We genuinely don't really know that much. And so I'm not doing those interviews where it's a bit cliquey and I'm chatting with Daniel Craig. We've both seen the film, even if you haven't, but we can have a laugh about what goes on in it. I haven't either. Yeah. And it's unusual, but actually I think it's really helped, because my questions then feel authentic, because I genuinely don't know the answer. So yeah, it's an unusual situation to be in, and a lot of people have said to me, so what's the film like? I said, I haven't seen the film. They're like, you haven't seen the film? But and it is unusual, but I don't necessarily think it was a bad thing. Also, of course, it meant that I didn't give away spoilers. It's like, if everybody's in the dark and my producer was in the dark about it, then we're all on the same level. The people listening and the people behind the scenes, me and my producer, we're all in a similar situation.
Yeah. And it keeps you fresh too. I mean, you could really tell in the vernacular. But you were immersed, like all of us, in a pandemic. So we had a podcast roll out, and then suddenly we heard the screeching of the brakes, and you must have felt it too. So, as someone that is a content creator, and clearly, you could tell your passion behind it. What was that like? What was the recovery of that?
Yeah, it was. It was a real shock because the first episode, had previously gone out in the autumn of 2020, and then the movie was pulled last minute. So obviously, we then pulled the remaining 5 episodes, and obviously I had to speak to Barbara and Michael about this. There was no point in trying to ignore it.
Yeah.
We had to address that and update the podcast appropriately. But I think initially it wasn't even thoughts about the movie particularly. It was a bigger picture. Frankly, we all had bigger things to worry about than a movie.
Right.
And that's the same with the team behind the Bond movie as well. They're thinking about safety rather than, is our movie going to come out next week? But in the year that's followed, I've done new interviews and caught up with people again and reflected about this unique situation that we've been in. And the thing that I got from those interviews, and my last interview with Barbara and Michael, which was just before the first episode dropped, so maybe 3 weeks ago, is that they were absolutely committed to putting this out on the big screen. Yeah. And of course there were rumors and discussions about streaming services, but I think that actually the delay has only solidified their belief that waiting was the right thing to do.
I would agree. My channel and several other channels were championing the theater experience. And a big part of that is of course having it in the theater. I mean, there's nothing like it. The other thing was community. I mean, there really has been a community that's been brought up around this, either nostalgic wise, when your parents would take you, or the community that kept us all together as one during a pandemic. And we want to do this as a crowd, and we want to do this within a theater. So we love that you and the powers that be are championing that continually.
Yeah, and it's funny, over here in the UK, Bond is a real TV staple. I think ITV have the rights, but there are always Bond movies on every weekend.
That's right.
So you do, ultimately, I think you associate, over here in this country anyway, you ultimately associate Bond watching it in your front room, watching it on the TV. But the first experience is the big screen one. And that's where you want to see it for the first time, maybe the second, third, and fourth time. It kind of dribbles down to the TV over many years, but it's certainly it's a kind of a cinema visit that attracts people who don't even go to the cinema very often. You will get and I know this from local cinemas who I'm in touch with. It's all been about Bond because they know that people who maybe only go to the cinema once or twice a year, one of those will be Bond. It's an appointment that I don't think, certainly in this country, I'm not sure any other film series really has. Of course, there are big blockbuster movies, but Bond is just a really different feel, and the expectation from cinema owners is like nothing else.
Yeah, I think that over here in the States, I mean, I'm going to speak from a very jaded and biased view. I'd be considered a fanatic, obviously, not just your mainstream Joe. But I find that over here in the States, we become much more affable and adoptive, embracing of Bond because he is this fallible creature. He's not Superman. He's not perfect. Just like us, we're all kind of anti-heroes in our own life. So people are really embracing Bond, especially this time around, a little bit as a savior, to kind of rescue us out of the doldrums of the stress that we're going through. So big shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah, and it's a big ask to really dot the I's and cross the T's and underline Daniel's story arc and finish it and conclude it. That's a big deal. We're expecting closure at the end of this film, which of course we weren't going to have in the other films because we knew that there would be another one to follow. There aren't going to be any more Daniel Craig Bond movies, so it's a big ask to put pay to that, to finally end it. So I don't think anybody was sort of taking this lightly. Not that they ever have, but
Right.
there was extra weight on shoulders this time around to say, okay, because we know the next one, it's going to be, for argument's sake, a reboot. They're going to be starting again with a new actor.
Probably,
So
yeah.
this one has to be a big finale. I just can't even really imagine what that's going to be, how that's going to work out. But I'm assured that it is the appropriate send-off for Daniel. It's the appropriate celebration, to bring that word back, of his time as Bond.
Your podcast has been so wonderfully effective there's this magic, and people describe it like this, maybe you do as well. There's this magic before a Bond movie. It usually takes place 2 to 3 weeks before. It's this rising, of excitement and preheat, and you turn into a child all over again. And I think your podcast has really helped to deliver that in a big way. But I'm going to ask you a Sophie's Choice type of question. I had to. There must be, in making these 6 podcasts, a favorite moment of yours that stands out. Do you have one?
It was certainly great to speak to Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who was brought on as one of the script writers of the movie, working with Neil Purvis and Robert Wade. And that's because I'm a fan of hers from her TV work. And she was just a great interview as well, just really fun and positive, and so excited to enter into this world. It's obviously her first time within the world of 007, so really appreciative of that. It was great to speak to her. It was great to speak to Hans Zimmer. I mean, the guy is a legend, and really fun as well. Very entertaining. And again, his first time in the Bond world, but absolutely, even though he's achieved everything in his career, he was so excited to be part of Bond, and to bring on Johnny Marr and get Johnny Marr to play the theme tune, and go, look, how exciting is this? We're some grown men who are legends in the music industry, but we're doing Bond. How exciting is that? So it's lovely to see people who you feel have kind of achieved everything already, but they're still so overwhelmed to be part of Bond.
It is. It's part of the magic that I've kind of described. But
yeah.
So, all right, we hear your voice, we see the experience, the 6 podcasts go through. Is there going to be a 7th? Is there going to be an 8th? Is this going to continue? I know you just got through this. You haven't even watched the red carpet, and I'm dragging you back.
Who knows? What I would say is, of course, it's the 60th anniversary next year. So I'm sure, whether I'm involved or not, there will be a lot of celebrations of that in various forms. So if you are a fan of Bond, you're not going to have to wait that long till there's another round of looking back, another round of wallowing in great Bond moments, because it's such a big anniversary next year. So we'll get No Time to Die Out. Enjoy that podcast, but then you'll have it all over again next year, I'm sure, in some way or form.
And we hope that we hear your voice, see your face, and you're a part of that. But from myself and the entire Bond community, thank you, not only for keeping the British end up and getting us excited all over again, but honestly, the global end up, as you can hear from my accent. So keep on doing what you're doing. And by the way, I'll be on the red carpet as well. I hope we wave to each other.
Oh, fantastic. So you're coming over to the UK for it?
I am. I've got a whole series of events planned and brand stuff, but I wouldn't miss the red carpet for the world. And to your point, it's such a community celebration. I have to be there.
Brilliant. Well, yes, give me a shout. We'll have a chat. We'll have a catch up.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. And James, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to chat.
All right. And this has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. And we'll see you all very soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.